There's a lot of rumor about the Fed coin and CBDC, central bank digital currency. There's also Bitcoin and now Fed now. So the question is, what is money and what does it mean? And anytime there's a big change, there's always the rumor goes up and speculation and panic and all this. And it's for good reason. Throughout history, who controls the money controls the world. And since 1944, America has controlled the money, with the US dollar being the reserve currency of the world, which caused America to boom, but it also caused many problems. And when we lose our reserve currency status, which started in 1944, the question is, what happens after that? And the way the dollar is set up, the dollar always loses money. It's called Triffin's dilemma. If you're the reserve currency of the world, the dollar always loses value because debt always goes up. So the Fed has to keep printing, the Treasury has to keep printing. And that's why if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which came out 25 years ago, it said the rich don't work for money, rich don't save money, because the dollar is fake. The US dollar is fake. All currencies are fake. So people talk about, the euro's getting stronger. To me, it's all bullshit. I want resources. I want gold, silver, oil. That's what, and today, Bitcoin. And that's how I think today. What do you know about this Fed coin and CBDCs and Bitcoin and crypto and all this? What does it mean to the average mom and pop out there? What's going to happen?
Well, I think the first thing people need to realize is just going back to what you were saying about Bretton Woods, when you stated that the United States was then in control of the money. To a certain degree, that's true. But now I would argue it's more so the banks. The banks control the money, and more specifically, the banks outside of the United States.
Amen.
95% of the dollars in the world were created by lending them into existence. So most people have this idea that dollars are just kind of a green piece of paper, and you take your green pieces of paper that you digitally get with your paycheck and deposit it at the bank, and then the bank kind of puts that in a vault and stores it for you until you need it. But what they need to understand is, again, 95% of those dollars were not green pieces of paper. They were lent into existence by a bank extending credit. And therefore, those dollars are a liability of a bank. Right. So if your listeners have an account with Wells Fargo or Chase, B of A, something like that, and what the depositors found out very quickly with Silicon Valley Bank, by the way, is that those dollars, which they considered assets, you got $100,000 in your account, that's your asset, but that was a liability of a bank. They weren't putting it in a vault. They were actually taking your money and they were lending it out, and you just had to trust that that bank was going to pay you back.
The IMF says the world economy faces the strongest headwinds or challenges since World War II. So here's a penny, it's copper. And in 1964, I was looking at the quarters and dimes, same color. Do you know what I mean? It's the same color. So basically, in 1964, dimes, quarters, and half dollars became copper. And that's what you were talking about, debasement. And I think we're paying the price for it. And every time people did this, first was the Chinese, they printed paper money, and the Chinese empire collapsed. And then when the Romans did the same thing, debased the currency, the Roman Empire collapsed. So when the IMF made that announcement, I was going, oh my God, because are we looking at the end of the American empire? The world economy is going to hit the biggest financial headwind since World War. What can you do? What our schools do to go to school, get a job, and get a 401k, I'm going, oh, gag me. I mean, I would never do that. But if you had bad teachers or poor teachers, or as your parents said, that's what you do.
The game these financial planners play is they only show you charts going back to 1981. And this is when Paul Volcker raised rates. So since then, we've been in a down cycle in interest rates. And you can say the stock market always goes up, right, if interest rates are always going down. But what happens when interest rates start going back up? And usually the cycle is about 30, 40 years. So if you look at charts of the stock market going back to 1927 to 1980 or 81 adjusted for inflation, it was pretty much flat. But see, they don't tell you that.
But something even worse happening is the last crash was, let's say 2008, when the repo market reversed and all this stuff. And most of these financial planners and real estate brokers, all they know is a rising market. Since 2008, we've been nothing, and happy days are here again because they kept dropping interest rates. Real estate went up, stock market went up, bond markets went up.
Yeah, and my objective might help some people kind of think about real estate or assets in a different way. The first goal that I had when I retired is just to look at my monthly expenses and say, how can I get my money to cover those expenses?
Yeah.
You see? And so how can I get my cash flow to
Right.
cover these things? So then I know that I'm never drawing my savings down. And I think it sounds easy and it sounds commonsensical, but very few people just kind of connect those dots and realize that if they can create enough cash flow with their portfolio to cover their monthly expenses, that is when you're financially free.
Yeah, that's a cash flow game. Out of the rat race, all this stuff. You got $10,000 a month coming in, you got $7,000 in expenses, $3,000 net, you're free. And there's tax breaks for it.
The cure for inflation is not more money. That's usually the cause of inflation or consumer price inflation. The cure for consumer price inflation is more stuff, produce more stuff. This is what we really need to push back against, assuming that you value freedom, liberty, free market capitalism, and especially your privacy. Because all those Orwellian things that we have heard of that we don't want to come to fruition, those cannot happen unless your dollars are on the Fed's balance sheet, or said another way, that your dollars are a liability of the Federal Reserve, that your bank goes from being Wells Fargo to Jerome Powell and the FOMC. And fortunately, the good news is that it's currently illegal. The Fed admits that it is illegal for them to have an account or an individual in the real economy. So as long as we make sure that they don't change that law and they don't break that law, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible.